everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of the What You Doing podcast. Once again, thank you so much for coming and checking us out. This episode, I am chatting with Andrew Beauman about his game Out of Orbit, which is on Kickstarter now. Asterisk, the pre-save page is live. The link to that should be in the show notes, along with everything else we talk about as always. And getting pre-saves before the launch of a Kickstarter is a very big deal. Absolutely helps with reach. So go ahead, click through there, check out the campaign page, and, you know, obviously listen to the rest of the episode. Listen to Andrew tell you about the game. If you're interested, go check it out. It's basically like wishlisting on Steam. You know, you're signaling to the developer and the platform that you want to know about this thing because you're excited about it. And then once it's live in February for Zine Quest, you can go check it out and, you know, maybe back it, maybe get a copy. I don't know. Hopefully you do. Very excited. This is the first episode that has a video companion. If you are interested, you can check out a video version of this episode with me talking to Andrew over at the brand new Patreon page, patreon.com/whatyoudoingpod. This will also be linked in the description. $5 a month gets you the show supporter tier. There's one tier. And the big bonus for that is video versions of the episode. If you're very excited about video versions, you want to help support the show, that's the tier for you. There's also going to be bonus bits and bombs whenever I kind of feel like it would be appropriate. So, you know, the big thing is the video episodes, and then the bonus things. There will be a bonus very soon, as I just need to go in and redo it, of a single episode version of episode 3. Episode 3 I had to release in 2 parts due to the length. There will be one sort of single cut version of episode 3 that was mostly due to hosting restraints. But there'll be one single file version. You can listen all the way through, start to the finish. You just plug it into your podcast app of choice. And the same thing with the videos. You'll hear more from me in the outro. Let's go ahead and get to the interview.
You sure it's plugged in? Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Yeah, I used to work in IT, and so that's okay. That's a lot of it.
Yeah,
you know, yep. I tell my friends all the time. Well, and then
like you think you're above it, like you think you're a little bit above it because you're like, oh well, I know that it's not that. This is a far more complicated issue right now that I will figure out. And it's like, but you haven't done that, so you are gonna waste your time.
Right. It's like, but you should still start. That was the thing all the time when I would work with people. I'd be like, okay, listen, I understand you've spent however long trying to fix this issue. We're going to start from brass tacks because I don't know what things have been done and I want to make sure these things have been done. Yeah. And so we're just going to start from the beginning and we're going to go on this journey together. Cause some people used to get mad where it's like, I rebooted it 3 times. Okay. It's not that I don't believe you. It's that Windows has a very particular way about the things that it does things. And so we're just going to go through. Like in Windows 10, they changed how shutdown works. So when you shut down a Windows 10 machine, it doesn't shut down. It just goes to an incredibly low power state.
Yeah.
And so they'd be like, I shut my computer down every night. I'm like, okay, but this thing you don't know means we should actually reboot it in this instance.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a pain in the ass. And it's like, I end up in that spot myself where I'm like, I'm doing everything. I'm like in BIOS trying to like tweak something. And then it's just like, wait a minute, I should have just power cycled. Like it would have been fine.
It's fun. It's a fun, I miss it. I miss it in the way that I actually didn't
romantically
mind. I miss it nostalgically. I miss it in that way of like you miss an old relationship that wasn't that great, but you're like, you know, we used to work. I worked in a collection of office buildings, and so a lot of my job was wandering around to people's desks and chatting with people all day, and it's like, you know, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I started doing the Monday morning stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know about those, but like I was like I made a little TikTok, and it was just like, hey, I miss having morning stand-ups, however worthless they were. Like, now that I'm doing this all the time, I'm like, I just need people there to listen to me for a minute so that I feel accountable to what I'm saying. And that's it. And it's been great.
It's just about having the connection. It's just about having, oh, it's weird. Okay, I can't put that window there, but I can put this window here. Okay. I'm moving some stuff around to make
not
it
that I care at all, but just for it knowing, are we audio only?
So I've been releasing audio only. I'm going to try with this one, and I can not if you want.
Yeah. No, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I'm gonna try doing video back into the process.
Yeah, totally.
I did
it's
the first
pain
one
in the ass.
I did the first one video, and it was a huge pain in the ass. And the second one, I did just audio. And then the third one I did with Jack and Cameron. And I did audio on a video call. And I really like the energy we had with that. And I was like, yeah, maybe video is the way to go. So at the very least, we're going to have a video, you and I.
Yeah, totally.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I get that. I hate, it's like when you run games, like I understand people don't always want to be on camera, and I'm not going to force anybody, but I'm like, please be on camera, especially if I'm running the game. Like, I need the human element of like, knowing if you're engaged on something, if you're really into it, or like if you're animated or upset. There's
a very different connection. There's a very different energy.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I had the thought on the last one. Like, let's try this. Let's try how it.
Yeah.
Let's try it out.
Sure.
And it was great. So that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, and Cameron and Jack are great.
Oh God, the two. I ended up having to put that out as 2 parts because of how long we ended up talking. I mean, granted, between the two of them, they're working on like 5 different things.
Well, and they're literally the best people. Like, Cameron and Jack and Cameron around the same time, but they're both new to the space, just like a lot of us, at least myself. So it's like. But they blew up. Like, they just like have done so much, and Cameron's a freak when it comes to like networking. Just true. Like, I followed him around at what was it?
At PAX?
I guess Gen Con, and then we only saw each other briefly at PAX, but like he opened so many random doors for like me and DJ, and like just can sit down and talk to literally anybody somehow. I don't know. I'm not like that.
It's really, he's definitely got that type A personality.
It's like car salesman without being scummy.
Right. He knows what he wants to do, and he's like, I'm going to do that. And like you said, not in a scummy way, not in a weird way. He's very personable. He's very direct. He's very straightforward. It was great.
Which is what I always get worried about whenever I'm talking about anything. I'm like, I don't want to be I hate sales, right? Like, I hate that experience. I'm like, I don't want to be selling. I don't want you to think I have an agenda, but I do.
You're telling
everyone
me
does.
You're telling me I'm like, starting this podcast thing where I'm just like, tell me about the thing that you make. And so I'm just always like, what do people think? I was just talking to my partner. I'm like, I'm getting to the part where there's some people that I want to ask to be on the podcast, but like, I feel like I have enough episodes that I can like Spencer, like Gila RPGs would be incredible. And I'm like, I feel like once I have like a good amount of episodes, I can ask him, because then it doesn't seem weird. Yeah. Like I'm just some dude.
He was
like,
our first.
No. I'm doing this. This is a podcast.
Spencer was our first guest.
Yeah. I feel like he'd be down.
And I just talked to him yesterday. Like, he's incredible.
Jack has been talking about talking to him. Penny's been talking about talking to him. He seems like a great guy. This is not anything about Spencer. This is like, I feel like I have to get my shit to meet him. So yeah. And I think
Spencer
it's hard
was like,
go ahead.
Oh yeah. No, Spencer was like a catalyst for me in a lot of this, because I basically found him at Gen Con a couple years ago, and I was like, I want to do that. Like, I was just fully like, this is because I wasn't as familiar with like that size of a book and like some of the narrative games that bent towards that. Like, because I had seen stuff that are like thicker, like Band of Blades, or like, some of those like non D&D stuff. But I was like, oh, you could go even smaller. Little did I know.
Pages.
Little did I know, one-pagers exist.
It's so that's a topic that's come up almost every episode, is just once you break out of, not even just to to shit on D&D, once you break out of your initial experience, once you find that door and break out into the wider ecosystem, it's incredible what you find. You go, what, and you're just it's an embarrassment of riches.
No, really, it is. Especially when you're. Oh, go ahead.
Let me twist my blinds really quick. It's brighter than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Stupid window.
Stupid sun.
Everybody's so fancy with their offices, and I'm like, this is my house.
I get it. Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Oh, and I think it's easier for y'all to talk to people like Spencer, because you're doing design work, you're designing games, you're working on your own stuff.
We weren't yet. So
well, that's true. That's
why I'm doing it. Because I was like, I really want to, and he's like, just do Zine Quest, and I was like, and then I did.
Don't give me an easy answer.
Right? Like,
how dare you?
Yeah.
What if I put this? Can I put you over here?
Whoa.
It's that thing of like, I want to capture a good like eye line. And okay, as long as that doesn't break. All right. Video, it's fun.
See, I got to turn my own camera off, otherwise I just keep looking at myself.
I do that all the time though. I match my eye line and it helps.
Yeah.
I should get a little like face or something for my camera so I can.
Well, yeah, like DJ's got a I think it's like the Elgato one for teleprompter stuff. I think he puts over his camera, but he puts his Discord up there when we're on calls, so he's looking like right at the call. That
makes sense. Some people are weird about that though. Some people are weird, like you're watching a video and it's like, hi, how you doing?
Yeah.
And it's like, So
we got to do the podcast thing where we're both talking offside.
Right? Yeah, we have to be holding our microphones very clearly, not on the same couch. That's definitely the real thing. Okay. So yeah, we'll just get into it. The last episode with Jack and Cameron was so casual. We were talking for 20 minutes, and it was just like, Cameron at one point was like, "So this is a podcast, right?" I was like, "Yeah, we should do like an intro and like lead into the podcast," which was very fun. But hi everybody, welcome to episode 4 asterisk of What You Doing podcast where I talk to cool people about the amazing things they make. Today I have Andrew Beauman, aka I mean, when I met you use a name you don't use anymore, which is very funny. I was scrolling back through your TikToks, and so I wanted to find a bunch of
I was doing chats. Chronoforge. The name was Chronoforge. I started doing stuff under that pseudonym or whatever back in 2020, and then like I knew a couple years ago, I knew a little bit about like some dumb crypto game that was like kind of Pokemon adjacent that popped up.
Is that why you changed it?
Yeah, and that's so then I just didn't change it for a long time, and then I was like, I'm publishing, I need to decide whether or not, like, how I'm gonna do it. I'm like, I should just, rip the Band-Aid off and get rid of it.
Yeah,
so
SEO.
Just me. Yeah, it's easier to just do it as me. I mean, I don't know, maybe one day I'll do something, but I've made so many brands over the years that I'm just like, I don't want to make another one.
Well, and you don't need to, and also you have a name in a back pocket if you ever need I need to make an LLC for production insurance purposes or something like that. Okay, cool, there it exists.
Right.
But yeah, we met through TikTok, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and probably like Titterpig, through Penny's server and stuff. Yeah, and then like just randomly popping in your streams and whatnot, and then just internet community. So
yeah, it's been amazing the amount of people and like, it feels weird to say, but quality of people that I've met through like TikTok and Titterpig Academy and stuff, because like you could meet, if I wanted to meet people, I could go outside and meet any number of people, but many of the people that I've met through, sort of what we'll call the end days of beggar talk, Titterpig Academy, just being on TTRPG TikTok, I've met so many amazing people that are not only interested in playing cool games and talking about cool games, but also making their own cool stuff.
Yeah.
And it's so incredible to see the amount of people that are making their own stuff, that are just so excited about the space, that, you know, come up with their own cool ideas, come up with their own, like, even like little one pages, you know, self-published stuff. And then, you know, guys like you and DJ who are like, I made a whole game, it's on Kickstarter, here it is. And ultimately your new project, which is what we're here to talk about. Andrew, I didn't even give you like an intro space. So why don't you intro yourself and then talk about your new work?
Yeah, my name's Andrew Beauman. I am a game designer, graphic designer, artist, illustrator, all that fun stuff. Some of those words are easier for me to say than others. Some feel like imposters, some don't. The easy one for me is I've been a graphic designer professionally for my entire adult life and then some. I got, you know, copies of like Adobe when I was 9. So like I started doing shitty band t-shirts back when I was, you know, like 10 and 11 for local bands and stuff.
I love that.
So that's kind of how I cut my teeth doing like freelance. And then did design forever. Worked for years with nonprofits and different small local brands. Like I said, I've built 1 million brands at this point, it feels like. So like I don't want to do that. But like do lots of logo design and stuff like that. And then like my love was always illustration and more creative works, but you know, the 1 year of art school I did before I quit pretty much beat that out of me, of like, you'll never make a living and you have to just go be a graphic designer. Fun fact, it's basically the opposite now.
Well, because everybody did that, so now it's swung the other way.
And so
it's like
I never
how everyone
really
said you should go to a tech school and not a trade school.
Oh my God. Yeah. And so like I really wanted to do illustration and stuff, but not very formally trained in it. Just, you know, always been the YouTube learner. And then back in, I don't know how much of a bio you want, but yeah, back in like 22 Gen Con, I went with my buddy DJ Baker Zakala to Gen Con. Did I say that? Yeah. And that was just kind of the year of like, hey, could we just do this stuff professionally, like specifically, right? Like, can we just start doing some of this professionally in some capacity? Because that's what I want to be doing. And I'd talked with my spouse like 1 million times about that kind of stuff. And I'd hacked things here and there, written tons of stuff, but never produced anything wholesale. Fell in love with, we were talking about it before we started recording, but Gila RPG's work. Spencer's incredible. DJ and I decided to start a podcast where we talk to people about games. Talked to Spencer. Spencer was like, do Zine Quest. And I was like, okay. I mean, my first game that came out, I guess it came out last year, which feels weird to say because that just happened, is Battle School. It is very much inspired by a certain novel that I read 1 million times growing up, that has kind of an unsavory author. So I kind of wanted to redeem that. I'm a big fan of that structure of, you know, young space cadets going off to a military school that's owned by some evil megacorp, and it's like a coming of age experience as well as at its core teamwork. And the theme for it didn't really come first. It was really just like I worked on some of these mechanics that I desired to encourage a certain kind of gameplay, and then I was like, I'm doing Zine Quest, I need some kind of theme. And my spouse was like, just do Ender's Game. There, I said it. And I was like, that's a perfect fit. And so that was my start in all of this. And Battle School, it shares its core system, Entwine, which is not like a published system out there right now. It will be one day. But it shares that with my next project, which is Out of Orbit. So yeah, which is what we're talking about today. And I'm doing that for Zine Quest this year. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, Zine Quest is kind of a Zine Quest is the Kickstarter one, right? Because there's like
Right.
2 or 3
Zine month is bigger. Yeah.
there's 2 or 3 air quotes competing things.
Yeah.
Zine month is the sort of program on Kickstarter for people to make sort of smaller works that run over the month of February as an idea to just make games, get games out there, kind of, take that idea that you've been hammering away at and just say, hey, chop it off, clean it up, get it done, get it out the door. And some fantastic stuff has come out of Zine Quest.
So much cool stuff. Yeah, I remember even just at PAX Unplugged, what is that, like a month ago, and just like looking around at some of the tables, even at like IPR's booth, in Indie Press Revolution, just like seeing, oh hey, I saw that on Zine Quest. Oh hey, I saw that on Zine Quest, and just like seeing so many of the people that, like myself, did their first game in 2024 and already have it in distribution and publishing and stuff like that. It was awesome to see.
Yeah, it's been a cool explosion of just people saying, okay, I'll finally make that thing, and then they make it and it's there and you can have it in your hand. And I think that breaks through the barrier a bit. Like I feel like when with making creative things, it happened to me with this podcast. I'm sure it happens with literally every creative endeavor, where you have an idea and you're like, I want to do this thing, but you start to run into a barrier about like getting it done and getting it finished and saying that it's done. And so I love the idea. Right now there's the 36 word RPG jam that I'm seeing a lot on Blue Sky, and I like the idea of just like, just do it, get the game made, put it out there, get it done. And I think it inspires a lot of people, and that's great. That's more games is always better.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like the whole thing, and I'm bad at this too, is like I blow scope so quickly. And I know to not do that, right? But that doesn't matter. And so it's like I'm a huge believer in creating really strict boundaries for yourself to actually encourage your creativity. Not a new idea, not mine. But like down to, I mean, you've seen some of Battle School. It's like I did only black and white. I did pixel art. I did things that would really push me to have to communicate with less tools, to make it more realistic for myself to crank it up. Because I think that's what's overwhelming. The 36 word game jam is a great example of like, this is all you get. Right. Like, you don't get to do anything else. You don't get to explain overcomplicated mechanics. You just need to get your idea out there, let people figure it out and have fun with it, and like check a box saying you did something and then move on to the next thing. Right. Yeah.
Because there's a lot you can say about what goes into game design and all of this, but if you've made a game and it's been a Kickstarter and it has been, I don't even want to say successful. I think if you make a game and put it on Kickstarter, regardless of what happens after that, you're a game designer.
Sure.
But especially if it's been successful and it's gone to people, you're a game designer. You're done. Write it down.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't feel real, but I agree with you, right? Like, I'm like, nah.
You're like, that's real for other people, but not for me.
It's like when people are like, oh yeah, I love your illustration. Like, you're such a cool illustrator. I'm like, I am not an illustrator, is what I want to say, right? Like, that is not, that feels like such a title to me because of being such a more like sterile corporate graphic designer for, over a decade. Right.
You're not wearing a big flowing smock, like painting on a wall. You're just,
I don't even have a beret.
You heard it here first. Got to send Andrew a beret.
But yeah, so yeah, I did it last year, and I was crazy enough to, after fulfilling, lock in and say I'm doing it again. So I don't know that I'll do it 3 years in a row. That sounds insane. But yeah, I mean, I really want to make this more of a full-time thing. I'm blessed with a very supportive spouse that makes this possible. I am a dad and a game designer right now, and I do some freelance here and there, which, if you're listening and you want to collaborate, I'd always taken on more projects because I love doing this stuff and I have the ability to do so right now.
Hell yeah. As always,
like,
links to all of Andrew's stuff will be in the show description. If you want to reach out.
Yeah, and like
links are always in the show description.
Like I had somebody from TikTok reach out and they're like, "Hey, could you just read this thing I'm doing for a 1-page jam?" And I'm like, "Yeah, totally." Read it. I was like, "This is dope. Do you need help with like getting it out there?" And it's like I got to do the layout on it, and it was just like awesome because I got to read it. It was a cool game, and then I got to do the layout for it. I'm like, that was sweet. But yeah, so I'm doing another project. It's called Out of Orbit. This one is more blatantly it's both of my games are very much I like this thing. I'm gonna make a game that facilitates that type of play style. And both games are using my system Entwine, which is about teamwork and collaboration, which I'll explain more later. But basically, this one's about Lost. Love it, hate it. I love the show Lost. I've watched it too many times.
Listen, you want to talk about Lost?
Are you familiar with it?
If you want to talk about Lost, you came on the right podcast. Let me tell you.
Hell yes. Okay.
I have flirted with the idea of doing a Lost rewatch podcast with a friend of mine for like 2 years.
Oh, man.
You can't see it because it's far in the background, but we've been rebuying the Lost Blu-rays and DVDs.
Yes. I was just talking with my spouse about that. I really want to get a bunch of physical media specifically for that reason, because Lost is like disappeared off of streaming services before, and I was like, oh, where'd it go?
Yeah.
But we're rewatching it again right now because it's work for me.
It's such a great it's funny to think that like your game is the first one that I've seen that has like directly referenced Lost.
Yeah.
As a GM-less like you use troop style. I think that's a great way to describe it. Like the idea that there's more characters than there are just players. Like, you have a massive collection. And I've never heard anyone reference Lost in that way, despite it being an incredible example for multiple genres.
Also, I have a friend that's watching it for the first time right now because I convinced him to, which I love getting people into Lost now compared to, when it was, a hot button issue and people hate on the ending. But I told him, I'm like, it's a tabletop role-playing game. The critiques you've heard that are levied against it are valid in the same way that your campaign is worthy of critique. Right. Because that's how it was written.
If we recorded your game, it would be the exact same sort of ebb and flow.
Yeah. I posted on Blue Sky or something, and I was like, if I wasn't how did I say it? It was basically like, if I didn't like a meandering game or a meandering story that asked more questions than it answered, I wouldn't play tabletop role-playing games. I just wouldn't. Yeah, that's perfect. What the show does. So why reference Lost? Why any of that other than just I like it? So I took Lost. The dev title for it for a while was Lost, in space. Before I decided on a name for it, just because like I didn't want to actually name it Lost in Space. And because that's not really the property that I'm referencing, even though it's similar. And
like, okay, basically it was, and they're in space, but it's not
Lost in Space.
Yeah, it's not. They just happen to be in space, and like we're in space, and they're lost.
Exactly, we're currently in space. Think about that. But yeah, so why? Lost uses. I love this.
Andrew's doing half of my job for me. This is the easiest podcast.
It's just I'm keeping myself on rails because I'll just wander. Yeah, basically the narrative structure of utilizing flashbacks and telling emergent backstory is interesting to me. We usually develop characters for a game either by rolling on a table and then they're a very shallow character that maybe one day we write some fanfic of our own character, or we have some deep backstory we work out with our game master in advance or something like that. It's sometimes worked out in gameplay, but again, that requires a lot from the player and the GM working together, which isn't what I wanted to do. So kind of OSR style, like you create characters by rolling. It gives you not so much stats. There's only 2 actual stats, which is just like health and drive, which is like stamina.
Sure.
But otherwise, it's just aspects of your character in terms of like backstory, details, right? Everything that goes onto your sheet throughout the course of the game is essentially just notes on who they are, what their personality is like, and what's happened to them in the past and what's happened to them while crash landed on this planet. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And then we use flashbacks, kind of inspired by the game Microscope. The way that the scenes work in that are kind of improv collaborations, to explore backstory for each of these characters throughout gameplay and to kind of further advance their character sheet. And like to your point, it's troop style. So these characters don't just belong to you. You're working as the audience and the directors of a show in a lot of ways. It's not GM-less. I still like the comfort of having a facilitator, but really the GM takes such a backseat facilitator role in my games. Because that's not. I used to run those kind of campaigns that were just like really, really hyper prep and like, focus on this amazing narrative that I basically write in isolation and then present to players. But like, that's not so much what I explore these days. I like emergent narrative. I like us discovering things together.
Well, and I think even just with my experience with GM-less games, it never hurts to have a person who is at the very least in charge of keeping you moving through the game. It's right. It doesn't hurt to have, and not even in a position of authority, but just a person that's there to be like, I think we're good. I think we've gotten to kind of the story we wanted to tell. We've done the thing. We can keep moving. Yeah.
And in that way, I would say the GM takes much more of like less like a traditional GM role and much more of like, you just get to be the environment and you get to roll on different tables, because the players are getting to interface with the environment, and then they're just responding. They're just the GM is just responding to how players roll, what they choose. I mean, it's gonna involve a lot of exploration. But again, I mentioned the system Entwine that's in both of my games. That is the core mechanic of it is basically your actions do not exist in a vacuum. That's true in life and in games. And so that's pretty much the way you could sum up the mechanics that I try to employ in this game. And that if you wanted to, especially Battle School, which is more combat centric than this, we've all been in those tabletop games where it's like you're waiting for your turn. Maybe you rolled poorly on initiative, you're waiting for your turn, and then somebody else drops fireball, and you're like, well, cool, like I'm done. I was going to try and convince them to sell this thing to us, but let's kill them. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sure. That's good too.
And so really the game play, anytime there would be a effective like initiative roll moment, which is not a mechanic in my game, but that type of environment that people are familiar with of an encounter, where time matters, turn-based stuff. There's a planning phase at top where all players are deciding actions that they want to do. Those actions then are given a value that actually helps calculate the DC for everybody that round. So if you're pushing forward and you're doing something very aggressively, another player's doing something very support, you guys have the ability to kind of control some levers to push the DC up or down based on how you're collaborating. And it's a transparent DC. So the GM gets to add a modifier. Every player is adding a modifier, and then we just sum it at the end to get the difficulty for that entire round. And then you do it again at the end of at the start of the next round. Which I like because it makes us all get to be like, okay, let's give you the spotlight for this round, and let's all make sure we make your thing happen. Or it's like, oh no, we're actually spread thin. We have to do multiple things, and it's going to just be harder because we're not able to support one another. And that's interesting to me. That's a type of gameplay I haven't really seen, that's reflected in the mechanics. And I think that it creates more of the tone and the interplay at the table that I'm interested in.
Yeah, and I was flipping through. I mentioned before we started, I was flipping through Battle School, get a try to get a handle on the mechanics and stuff like that. And I really like that idea of the things that you're doing, determining how hard those things are, and then the GM having a little bit of a thumb on the scale to be like, hey, listen, there's other things than just what you're doing that are affecting this,
right?
But I really enjoy that interplay of, like you said, like, oh, we're going to give you the spot. Like, this is a situation. There's a thing that needs to be dealt with. You're going to handle it. We're going to this scene is going to be you handle it. And that's what we're focused on. And I appreciate that. Like you said, the interplay of mechanics of, and it being, transparent. Everybody know,
Right.
Nobody's picking secret actions or anything like that. It's just like, no, we're going to do. Okay. And like, I think there's been a pushback the last like year and a half or so against the concept of metagaming being bad.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like just the word metagaming has an incredibly negative history for no reason. For one specific reason, and people conflate it terribly. And just, I love the idea of just like right before the narrative thing, let's get all the mechanical conversation out of the way and let's get that done. And then we'll get through it. And then we can describe how it works narratively, and we can talk through it. That's great. It's a very exciting
I've had people I've tended away from describing it as permission to metagame, which is how I did for a long time, because people were like, oh, just don't use that, people freak out. And I'm like, oh, whatever. But yeah, I mean, it truly is what I used to like get slapped with saying it's metagaming. Like, let's just talk about what's going to happen. Like, what are we trying to pull off? We are players at the table. And if we're playing a game that is about a shared narrative that we all are invested in, we should give a crap about what an individual is trying to pull off and help make it happen.
Right.
Or at least recognize that if we're not a part of it, we could be making it harder for them, or we could be, spreading ourselves too thin. So I'm interested in like teamwork and collaboration, because that's the kind of games I make and the kind of games I play. For the life of me, I have the hardest time playing solo games because I'm a social gamer, right? Like, I like the interfacing and the unexpected nature of dealing with other people, and which is what this game's about, right? It's just kind of one step further. So yeah, I mean, you've got a troupe of survivors, is what they're called in this, instead of just characters, right? So you, the very first scene in the game that you're supposed to run is the crash. If you've watched Lost, the camera is surveying the crash scene, and we zoom in on the first player and we say, okay, time to roll up your character. And so they roll, and maybe they're the pilot, and then we roll for their background, their like all these, their character flaw, whatever, and then we roll their current injury. On that injury table, if you roll a 1, they're dead.
That's great.
So you can die in character creation.
I love that though. That's great.
But what's cool is it's kind of like a knockout system for all the different type of character backgrounds that you can be rolling. So it's like, if the pilot's dead, that's a big deal if you guys find a plane later, because you don't have somebody to fly it. And so yeah, you kind of take these moments, these people get to roll up their character, you move the camera onto the next person, and then the injuries also kind of present initial encounter and role play, or like needing to help one another. And then it's about establishing a camp early on, which kind of enacts the first cycle for the game. One of the references for the game is Band of Blades, Forged in the Dark. The way that Band of Blades uses like the cycle between mission and their camp, I don't remember what they call it, but their camp phase is really interesting to me, in the way that players embody these roles. And so I kind of took that one step further, and again, using the Lost example of like, okay, somebody's over medical, because we're going to need somebody to heal these people when they get hurt. Somebody's over security, which is like, maybe they need to strike up a little militia of people to patrol the camp late at night to make sure, creatures aren't getting into the camp. Somebody else is over kind of engineering and able to like reverse engineer weird stuff, artifacts to get found, or cobbled together scrap from the crash itself to make some technology that we can use. So these different hubs are actually the whole advancement system. These players, the characters, the survivors, don't have any sort of true level up advancement beyond like flashbacks and events that happen to them. Those allow them to be better at things slightly, but not like I add 20 to my roll or anything crazy. It's much more just like I slightly roll better.
Yeah. My favorite part of Lost was when Jack opened the hatch and could divine smite once a day.
Oh yeah, it's great.
That was so good. That was really changed his character arc.
Yeah, and so the point is the survivors are not, this is not a power fantasy game. This is a survival and social drama, it sounds
a lot like it might be something you're already familiar with. Andrew, have you seen the video game Frostpunk?
Yes. Yeah.
So the Frostpunk is it's a video game, as I said, where it's a management sim game. You're in charge of one of the last cities on the planet. The planet has basically completely frozen over, and you are managing all of the sort of resources and needs of people in the city, where you're trying to manage heat, you're trying to manage food, you're trying to manage medicine and various factions' wants and needs. And that sounds like a cool thing to pull into a game that I think without it could just evolve into people talking,
Yep,
and I think totally. I think that's the struggle people run into when they start trying to play games without hard objectives. Things like D&D or Shadowrun or whatever that have kind of clear advancement, clear objectives, which is usually kill people, take stuff,
kill monsters, get money.
Right. When it's like, okay, I'm playing Fiasco, it's just two people talking at each other. What are we trying to do? Right. At the very least, like you said at the beginning of a game of Out in Space, like people are injured. Okay, at the very least, we got to start dealing with this. We have to start interacting with each other and dealing with that. And then having sort of a quote unquote base mechanic, having jobs and things you have to resolve.
Yeah.
Is immediately going to put characters into conflict.
Decouple it. It's interesting to decouple it again to the metagamey point, to decouple it from any individual character in the story, right? So it's like, this is just you as a player. You're in charge of this part of our mechanic, right? Our camp. And so it's like, however you want to narrate that, like you might say, yes, we have a doctor in camp and they are always there, but that you don't have to do that. You're just managing some of the mechanics. You're rolling on event tables that affect the resources for that part of the camp. And you're also talking to the other players about how you might all spend resources to advance the camp itself, right? We might need some resources from engineering and some help from, security in order to beef up and build like a wall or something around the camp to make it safer. But we had to use a lot of resources that engineering had to like level up security, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so there's an interplay
and those are resources
of mechanics.
Those are resources that aren't going towards some sort of resource scanner thing that somebody else, could be doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think
I'm actually.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think that's an interesting thing in the troop style thing where it's not conflict between players, it's a conflict between the characters. Yeah. And then as players, we can decide how interested we are in that. Like, are we really interested in focusing on the conflict between these two characters over this, or do we just want to do it? And it's like, no, they figure it out, it's fine. Or the twisteroo, we figure it out, it's fine. We get a little bit like, actually, maybe he is mad about it. Maybe he was mad the whole time. And maybe that's how we describe this scene.
So let's talk about that real quick. So something I'm really excited about is the flashback mechanic. If you're familiar with Lost at all, you know that flashbacks is kind of the main way that we explore who these characters were and are on the island. So in our case, we don't really know. We have a couple details, they're a pilot, they like underwater basket weaving or something, like you don't know ton about them, right? If you're out on a mission, right? So I didn't really talk through this, but basically, we decide at camp we need to create some objectives for a mission, or maybe there's something prompted by the GM. We're sending out basically the player count number of survivors out on a mission. So everybody gets to declare, oh, I'm gonna use Jim, I'm gonna use Bill, I'm gonna use Susie, and we're gonna go out on this mission. Everybody declares why that character would want to go on this mission. It could be obligation. It could be, I'm just a warm body. It could be I have a selfish objective of I really want to get resources and hoard them away for myself. Whatever you want it to be. And then they go out and they try and accomplish it. This is the part that feels the most like a straightforward kind of role-playing game that we're used to. You're on a mission. There's going to be exploration mechanics. I'm still working on if it's good. I think it's probably going to be a point crawl more than like a hex crawl kind of thing, but not terribly important for our conversation. But yeah, so there's exploration mechanics where you go out and you're trying to pull things off, right? You're trying to find the weird signal that's coming from over the hill and figure out why, it's transmitting or something like that. While on that journey, you're looking to roll well on anything, if you have to climb a cliff face, you could have a character and you look at your character sheet, you're like, well, I am an engineer and I am really into X, Y, and Z, and nothing on my character sheet has anything to do with climbing. There's nothing to say that I would be any good at this at all. And I feel like he would be. Like, I feel like my character would be, and I like that idea of them being good at climbing. And so in that moment, you get to spend a resource, which is called drive, which is also used kind of as a reroll mechanic. And you spend that drive to enact a flashback. So we pause story right where we are, and we flash back into that character's history. You as a player get to set the scene a little bit. You set up who might be in the scene other than the character, and you then get to say what a question is. This comes from Microscope. You state a question, and you can load that question up with interesting details because anything in the question is a fact, right? So it's like why to our example, it's like, why is this scene where I'm rock climbing with my dad the last time we ever spoke together? And it's like, okay, we don't know. We're going to play to find out in a much more just improv, minimal mechanic scene, 3 to 5 minutes, basically. And then somebody's like, well, I'll be the dad. And then somebody's like, I'll be the climbing instructor or guide or whatever.
Right.
And then other people can just opt to be audience or can be like an emergent cast member if it feels appropriate. And then you just act it out and you have that conversation with your dad while rock climbing, and something comes out in the narrative, of like, actually, maybe the dad's terminally ill. Maybe they just get into a fight. Like, you get to find out why in that moment, this is the last time you ever spoke with your dad, which is cool for backstory. But also now you get to add climbing trip with dad to your character sheet. And now you get to roll better on climbing this cliff face. So we zoom back into the moment. They're on the planet. You're climbing the cliff face. You roll a little bit better. Maybe it's not incredibly better. It doesn't matter. But now when you're rolling things that are related to something you've now defined on your character sheet, there's something to pull on. And that tag of a flashback can be pulled on for many different reasons. Anything that got established in that flashback counts under that kind of umbrella. It's like, maybe we were tying knots a lot. It's like, oh, cool. Yeah. Like, that makes sense later on when you're doing some crafting thing around camp and building structures and stuff. So that's kind of that whole system. And one of my favorite things that I'm excited to see happen with it is kind of, it came out of something a friend asked. I've played with similar people the same group of people for many years. And some of them are very different gamers and have had the friendliest conflicts over the years, right? Like, we're old friends. But because they're different, they can run into that. And what the question was is, what if I make the equivalent of a lawful good character? Let's just make him a cop for the sake of what I'm getting at. Not that that's lawful good, but they're just a military individual that's super straight laced. Like they would never ever do anything like out of selfish act of violence or anything like that. They would never kill somebody in cold blood. I define this character in the crash scene at the beginning of our game, and then I didn't play them for a couple sessions, and then you picked them up and you kill somebody in cold blood. Well, that's annoying.
Right.
It's not blatantly on the character sheet that he wouldn't do that. Like, we're not using an alignment system, but that felt off type. And so that was kind of the question that got presented. And I was like, oh man, yeah, I guess just talk to him, you know?
Yeah.
Which,
sounds like you should, you should have a conversation.
But this is where flashbacks can come in a fun way. So this is where you get to go, hey, what you just did felt off type for kind of what I initially defined for that character. It still happened. You did it. It was off type. Can we do a flashback to add justification to why he just killed that person in cold blood?
Right. What happened in their history
that we didn't see?
Right. That now in the very TV way of this character would never kill anybody, and then he kills somebody, and then you're like, what do you mean? Why did that happen? And then in the way Lost does all the time, flashback. Why did this happen? Why did it not happen all that time and then happens now?
Yeah, and so then you find out the person that was killed in cold blood, did something awful and traumatic to that heroic character, and this was a breaking point. And maybe it changes who they are now that they got revenge. Like I think about like Sawyer and that whole arc, like the way that was impactful. And so yeah, I don't know. That I'm really excited about, because it both is just fun for like, I want to get better at this one role. But also at the table, it's a way for us to make a more interesting and compelling narrative that feels internally consistent for each and every one of us.
And I like it's an idea I've had for a while, and I was surprised that a game doesn't exist that does it. Is something like this that emulates any number of board games or video games where you have like a fantasy mercenary company, and you're like, oh, I'm building up all these guys and I'm going to go on the thing and I'm going to take these specific guys. And I was surprised that no game had ever done that. And so I'm interested in this. Like, you have the collective, and then you're doing a thing. And I will say, is the first, listen, if I'm giving Andrew too much praise, it's because this is the first I've literally heard of it. I'm excited. I like having to decide when you go on the mission, this is my character, this is my character, this is my character.
Yeah.
And you have to embody and sort of align their goals. Because like you said, that could immediately come to conflict. That could come into a conflict with how you as the player have treated a different character, or you've been playing that character more, and now you're playing the opposite side character. And then you have to decide how do you flesh out that conflict? How do you address it? Anything like that. I think that's going to lead to a lot of interesting conversations that I don't think a lot of other games facilitate in that way. Yeah. Like are as direct about. Yep, totally. Like the flashback, like flashbacks for Blades in the Dark are great, but it's more, like you said earlier, like it's more about the narrative justification. It's like, okay, why do you have this knife in your pocket that you managed to slip by? That's why. And it's like, okay, that's fine. And so I think I like the idea of it being like a proper improv scene of establishing multiple details.
Yep.
And just really building that backstory together. Because I think that's the thing people get hung up on a lot, is like creating backstory in a vacuum. And doing it collaboratively can be a lot of fun. And mechanizing it in the game is fantastic.
Right. And then like I want people to, and I don't think anybody does anything that's not in reaction to experiences they've had, because that doesn't make sense.
Right.
But I am a very reactionary game designer, right? Like I have had not like a bunch of horrible experiences, but like I've had experiences that I go, that could have been better. Why was that the way that it was? And it's like I design around like any game is designed to facilitate a specific type of gameplay and experience. And I desperately crave a really rich collaborative narrative being told over, spotlight being hogged by anyone in any particular way. And like I've even conversely, like as a game master running long campaigns, I've had favorites. I have clearly put more time into certain character backstories and tying it into a campaign and been like, ugh, that feels crappy. Right? Like, and so in this way, I'm hoping that people take ownership of the show, to use the Lost example, right? Like the show, and of course have favorite characters that they like to play as, but part of the narrative conceit of the game is you're not able to just take the same character out again on the next mission cycle. They have to rest.
Right. Right.
Is the idea. So it's like you're always trying out these different characters, hopefully, and you can have your favorites and come back to one that maybe you created or have developed a lot. But also, you get to have those moments of like, I could play as this character that Matt made, and I think I've got an idea of like something in his backstory. And then like you, Matt, being able to be like, interesting, I didn't expect that for them. And I like where this is going. Let's build on that. Or even you being like, oh, that's weird. Why would that be the case? Where are we going with this narrative? And the drama of a show that is full of a bunch of characters that nobody's necessarily the protagonist allows for twists that I don't think we normally get narratively at the table of a TTRPG. Because all of a sudden, any of these survivors could be part of a secret organization working to sabotage everybody.
Right.
And
Always.
we decide that, right? Like that's fun. Now somebody doesn't go, oh, I'm the GM's favorite and I'm secretly the villain, right? Like that didn't happen. This character lives in a limbo between NPC and player character, right? We are watching a show and directing it together in the direction we want it to go.
Well, and to that point, the fun thought I had when you brought up that like you can have a character that has died in the sort of group creation is that character still had a goal. That character was there for a reason. That character was doing something. And so even though that character is dead currently in the current fiction, that doesn't mean they didn't exist or interact with other characters in again, the fun Lost way in flashback or in setup or whatever. So when it's revealed that someone is a member of the Weird Shadow organization, maybe that's the pilot that died. And it's like, oh, we found, we found like a black box. We found like a cache of all of this. Like why was he on the pilot of this one with all of us? Why were all of us on this one? Right.
Yeah, no, totally. And like, it
leaves that narrative thread available in a fun way that it's like, no, that character still exists. Don't,
And again, referencing Lost, it's like the fun thing that you get to play with in these flashbacks is are these characters that are currently on this planet tied together in their life before, however surface level, or that they aren't aware of, but we as the audience are aware of, whether it's, John Locke rolling by in a wheelchair past, like in the background or whatever, like seeing references to the current timeline in these flashbacks is a fun way to build out a rich network of characters. And I like the whole idea of that, like maybe these characters were meant to be here for some reason. Maybe this planet is more than just a rock floating through space. And so, that kind of gets to some of the setting stuff that I play with. Technically, my game takes place, so Out of Orbit takes place in the same setting as Battle School. And so, you could have gone to Battle School. And now you're on a rock and floating through space. But it's there's a lot of like fun stuff that I'm diving into right now mechanically with the exploration and the weirdness of the environment that again feels very lost, of like trying to figure out ways to make it not fully gonzo, but also just a very strange, mysterious place that you're trying to kind of unravel the mystery of. So that's a fun part, because I see, because we're talking about characters right now, it's like I see so much of that character getting to be the GM, unraveling that over time, both through emergent things like rolling on roller tables, but also just as the characters are invested in different things, being able to be like, ooh, yeah, I'm going to build that part of it out. Or we're going to get really weird in, bio horror or something bizarre that like just is interesting because of the things that are playing out through flashbacks or like the narrative thread going on at the camp. The camp might be having a bunch of infighting and they might stumble on something that is a narrative parallel, right? Because you get the narrative symmetry when you're watching these shows. And you get to do that as the GM.
And that's I think, harkening back to what we were talking about before, I think the benefit you get when someone at the table is the designated GM, where keeping up with those sorts of threads and like and noticing trends like that is a little easier because that's their role. So they know like, oh, okay, hang on, so this came up and this is here and this, oh hey, what if we brought this back? They're playing a slightly different game to everyone else, and they're facilitating the overall motion and kind of the themes that you want to see. Which is I think trickier in a GM-less game, just because people get focused on what they're focused on, not in a negative way, but just it's good to have someone who's a little more of a directorial role that can spot this came up again, even if it was unconsciously. We can pull this together. And
yeah, and it rides the line between a GM'd game and a GM full game, which is a term I learned more recently, where it's like it's not fully GM-less, but the players have so much more narrative control than a trad game. That's just like, I am here as my character in the environment, and I only can control myself, and that's it. But like I don't know. That's fine. That's fun. That's a cool way to explore sometimes, but that's not so much what I'm building out here with this one, where it's about us all telling the story together. So
right. It came up in my convo with Jack and Cameron, is there's not one form or version or whatever that's better than the other. It's the version and the mechanics that you want to use to tell the story, to facilitate the outcome you want as a design. Yeah. And for this design, this is the mechanics, this is the vision.
Yeah, if you want to have a power fantasy where you are killing God, this ain't the game for you.
Yeah.
This is much more akin to the experience of like Mothership. Like this is much more like that whole idea of like, you're a pathetic little person that is desperately trying to survive in a hostile environment. That's interesting. And the human side of it is going to come out in the interplay with other players and the characters that they're choosing to embody at any given time. But yeah, I mean, it's been a blast to develop it. I have been working on the idea since I was working on like early Battle School, because I was already Battle School answers the question of Entwine, my system, of how does combat work, right? That is just like, how does that work as is? This is answering the question of like, how does exploration work? How does more narrative forward stuff play out? And Battle School doesn't necessarily account as much for like individual non-encounter moments for dice rolls. Like it's basically like, if you're not in the battle room in Battle School, you're probably not rolling a whole lot. There are mechanics for it, but it wasn't really answering that question. It was basically like, this is a combat sim, right? Like that's
you're focused on this part of the experience.
Yes. Whereas this one, like even when I ran some playtests for it, it was like, okay, yeah, like this needs to still, even though we have the round DC structure for how Entwine works, there's also just going to be flat DCs when you're just off. Like, I'm investigating this plant. Yeah, you're just going to roll it. It's not going to have anything to do with everybody else's choice of action in that moment. Like, that doesn't make sense. So like there are moments like that where I'm discovering little bits about how the system works as a larger idea. And the hope is to make like I don't know if it'll be an SRD. I don't know if it'll be like a generic system or what it's going to be down the road. But I've also got a buddy, DJ. He's working on a game that's using it for Zine Quest as well. So that's going to be interesting to see where he explores the design space with it and see what it can do. But yeah, I mean, it's been a really fun process. I'm excited about the art too, because I'm doing a different thing than Battle School. Mm-hmm. And I'm leaning pretty heavily into one of my favorite artists, Mike Mignola. He's the artist of Hellboy, and just absolutely killer with his shape language and the way that he draws. So it was kind of like, it was a question of like, hey, like I kind of would love to just be able to do that. So let's just do some character studies using kind of his style and making it my own. And then I was like, oh, cool. This is what the art style is going to be for this whole book. Which is fun because it's dramatic.
Like this. We'll do this.
Yeah. I guess this is what I'm doing because I didn't know if I wanted to do pixel art again. I love pixel art. It's so freaking cool and fun. And I liked doing all the black and white, which I am doing still. Like it is going to be another black and white book. But I was like, I don't know if I want to confine myself to tiny squares again. And it didn't fit the tone as much, like it felt crunchy and like, video gamey for Battle School. Whereas for this, I wanted to do more organic stuff and it didn't feel right. Like I'm doing a bunch of environmental shots of, like landscapes. And I was like, you can do it in pixel art, but it's just the tone of it was different. So the art's shaping up quite nicely in a different direction than I expected initially. And I love it. And then
I've seen a number of your TikToks. It looks really cool. Just the art direction.
I'm having fun.
I'm digging. I love the anytime anybody that does design gives like the smallest peek into the behind the scenes process. I love. Andrew showed this like amazing drawing he was doing of like a face surrounded by hands. And then just on his phone, like panned the camera over to the side, and it was a Photoshop of his face and hands that he just sort of put. And I was like, "That's amazing. That's incredible. Like what? Like that's so smart. It's so effective, and it's so cool to as a person who kind of who always personally like struggles with artistic expression and things like that to be like, oh yeah, oh that's amazing." Like that's so smart, and it's such a cool way to visualize that.
I love showing process stuff, not because it's easy for me to do, but because it's good for me to do, if that makes sense. It's so freaking vulnerable, like and working in public, but it really is a good practice of accountability and community building, right? Like I have like a Discord of other creators that we meet on Mondays, and like that has been one of the most fulfilling things I've done since kind of becoming a game maker, because like
you can say it, game designer. You can say it,
game designer. I made one, so I'm a game maker too, right?
I physically printed it, so it's both.
Yeah, it exists. But yeah, so like with doing those Monday meetings and like connecting with these other creators, just being able to say like, hey, this is where I'm at. Like, am I on to anything? Like, is this good? Am I going in the right direction? And then being either like, yes, you're killing it, keep going, or like, no, stop. Like, yes, correct. Like you were correct to question yourself. And like that level of like valuable critique that's coming from professionals in the space that are genuinely trying to help and have no reason to compete with you in that moment. Like I love the working in public part of it because of what it does for me, but not because it's easy for me. It's very scary to do that.
I think that feedback on both sides can be incredibly valuable, of someone saying, no, this is great. Don't listen to the stress. Like keep going. This is good. This is something cool. and conversely, someone just go, no, it's buddy, it's fine. Just don't. You're wasting a lot of energy. Just step away from this one. It's fine. It's fine. Because that's good. It's like I said, it's valuable both ways. It helps you from burning your wheels in either direction.
I can give you another sneak peek because we're talking about art. I got lots of spreads that I've been working on here. This one's funny. So this is the other reason why feedback's important. So I put this on Blue Sky. Apparently Blue Sky didn't think it was very funny, but I made this. I sent you this image here, which was just an example spread. And just let me know what you think about the shape of that building that I drew.
Oh, is it good? It's one of these.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It has a flared base.
Yeah.
So it's safe.
Here's the thing. Is it the first thing my mind would go to? No, probably not. Is it that far from where? No, I see it. I see it immediately. As soon as you say
it's too close. So yeah, it ended up, I updated it. Now it's really unsafe. So
oh yeah, there you go. That's great. Yeah. Great change.
So it's like, but like as silly as that is, it's like, it is so good for me not to like love this piece and develop a ton of stuff, maybe reuse that same shape of structure throughout the book, and somebody be like, yo, that looks like a certain utensil. It's like, oh yeah, no, I shouldn't do that. I can change that right now. So yeah, work in public. Show your work.
I think it's that's a great example. I think just a perfect example of like, hey, what do you think of this? Andrew, I have a very important feedback, and you're like, okay, I get it. I see.
It's like, I still like it, but you're right.
Yeah. I think I love I love the idea this working in public. I really appreciate the thing that I appreciate about the TTRPG design space as a person outside looking in that I'm not a designer and I don't really have any plans to be, but I get to see a lot of designers interacting in public and sharing their design, sharing their thoughts, sharing their ideas, and working non-professionally collaboratively. And what I mean by that is not working together on a project, working on their own projects in a public facing space and engaging and allowing conversation about those designs. It's such a cool thing because it's so awesome to watch designers go. Like a great example, we were talking about Gila RPGs. Spencer got really excited about I think it's called the Songs and Saga SRD by Fairy RPGs. Like there was like 2 weeks, like he wouldn't shut up, and like he made a game about it and he was talking it up, and that's as a fan of TTRPGs, as a person who like is clued in, that's super cool because one, it's cool to see what designers like, right? It's cool to see a person who makes cool things be excited about a thing that they're excited about. 2, that's really cool promotion for Fairy RPGs and all of his stuff. And 3, like that's the two of them working together on stuff, and it builds that community even stronger. You know, it's not some weird
it's the part of game design that is really refreshing to me, that we can all copy each other's work and nobody can do anything about it, no matter how hard Wizards tries.
And you're not competing, like, you know, you're not inherently like, no, I have to get the game. It's like, no, like we can all make the game and it's great and we can have a good time.
Well, it's like, and there's so many of these mechanics that you just need to wholesale just use them. Like it's not, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You know, I was looking at flashbacks for the game, and luckily I was already looking into Microscope, but I had no idea how I was going to do flashbacks. I had no clue. I was like, how does this work? It's so important to the narrative structure of telling this kind of story. So either I throw it out and somebody goes, oh, this is inspired by Lost, how are you doing flashbacks? And I go, or I needed to like make something up. And like, I don't think I could have made a more elegant version of it. Like I got the opportunity to talk to Ben Robbins, the author of Microscope, and like he's incredible. And I was like, hey, here's
That's
what I
cool.
want to do with it. Like, what do you think about this? Any thoughts and feedback? He's like, this is great. Like, I love what you're doing with it. Here's some ideas. Like, but the fact that I was able to just go, this guy did it back in 2011. This is great. People have played this game. They love this game. It works. I wonder if I just said, hey, could I get your input? And he answered, and we talked, and it was great. And he wants to keep talking about stuff. Like, that's insane.
Right.
What world, like, do you get to, like, just fully, not collaborate, but, like, fully have access to people in that way where they're like, yeah, let's just chat. You know, even doing, I do a podcast with DJ called, you know, we'll self promo here, I guess, but One Shot
It's
Tavern.
the point of the episode, Andrew. Like, it's not.
But yeah, so One Shot Tavern. So we talk about, like, just games in general, but like when we started the podcast, it was like a cheat code when it came to access to cool people that just wanted to talk. But then I realized I didn't need it, right? Like, I could just talk to these people because this community, I use the term community loosely because there's many communities in it. But it's like, I have yet to reach out to somebody who's been an asshole like that. I mean, there have been assholes, but you get what I'm saying? Like, where they've been rude about it and like, or just gaslit or not ghosted me and like not gotten back or whatever. Like, most people are like, yeah, I totally have time. Love to hang out for an hour, or, you know, have hopped on the podcast or talked to me and gave me advice professionally. Cause like it's so much like about like the mutual aid of it all. And like, we can do mutual lift because we just want to play cool games and we want more cool games to exist.
Yeah. And like you have the right of it. Just the mutual lift is, I think, a great way to describe it. Of just like, Ben is interested in your game being cool because, you know, and hey, this sounds cool. I think, you know, it's cool that you want to use a thing that I wrote in your thing. That sounds cool, you know, bang on. And that's great. Like, that is a positive outcome for everybody involved.
Yeah.
And it's just, it blows me away still to see it. And maybe it shouldn't, but I think being excited about it is still good.
Well, and I mean, like, it's cool because of, I guess, the legality of, like, you can't copyright game mechanics. Like, that forces the hand, but in like, it doesn't feel forced, right? Like, we can all just hack each other's stuff, and as long as you're not literally plagiarizing them, you're fine. And like, that creates a community where we're all looking at each other's somewhat innovations in the space and saying, like, either how do I lift that out of that and do my thing with it, or maybe I don't need to actually reinvent the wheel and make a whole system right now because this does exist and I just didn't know about it, which happens all the time for me, where I'm like, ooh, I'm working on a thing. That's how I ended up on Microscope. I had a different game that I was developing that's just on a shelf now. It's called All Worlds Fall. That was all about the rise and fall of civilization. It was a GM full game. And then someone's like, yo, you've heard of Microscope, right? I'm like, oh, no, I didn't. This is perfect. But now it's just, it's on a shelf somewhere, but I'm just going to more directly hack Microscope and have it fit what I wanted to do with it, because I read Microscope. I'm like, this is 80% there for what I wanted to do. I just want to add my flavor to it. So now I just get to make a Microscope hack rather than it just being like this ignorant thing in the space where I'm trying to reinvent the wheel and have no idea that there's already some killer games out there that do that anyway.
I actually just saw a big Blue Sky thread from somebody about that, of just like, and it's the opinion I have as well. Like, if you want to be a creative in the space, you need to be well read in the space. Because for moments like this, absolutely, where like you want to design, and I think it's a balance. It's not meant to be gatekeepy to say, like, if you want to be a designer, you have to read everything. Hey, it's in your benefit to read as much as you can, and especially explore the space that you want to design. Right. You know, if you want to do a Microscope hack, or you want to do a Blades in the Dark hack, or you're like, I want to write a Powered by the Apocalypse game, go out there and read those and be familiar, because like you said, you don't want to waste your time reinventing the wheel when, somebody already figured out how to do almost
Yeah.
exactly what I want. And what I can do is I can take that and I can tweak it very slightly, or I can do the opposite. And okay, that's what I'm going to do.
It
And
just
there we go.
informs you on how you respond to what you read, right? Like I was reading through, it's a Dungeon World supplement. It's called Perilous Wilds. It's
Perilous Wilds is good.
Incredible.
Perilous Wilds is so good.
Don't need to play Dungeon World at all to enjoy it. It works for everything.
I think they spun it off as its own kind of standalone thing.
Yeah. They still reference it throughout. I was just reading through it the other day. I was like, oh wow, yeah, they still are saying it. But it's a phenomenal book of resources for exploration. It is a masterclass on how to make amazing roller tables, which I'm fully just going to be using it as my inspiration for a lot of the exploration in Out of Orbit. But yeah, it's just there's so much. There's a reason why I brought up that book. Hold on. Yeah, I don't know. There is somebody recommended that when I was working on exploration, and it was a matter of, I'm gonna go read this and see how my idea that I have without knowing about it fits into it or in spite of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps me on the journey of the design space, right? Like through the design space and figuring out where my mechanics need to land, how complex do they need to be? Maybe I need to simplify. And like, I didn't know, I barely know, much now. You are constantly going to be greeted with your own ignorance about how big the space is as you explore it, which is not a thing to be scared of. Right. And that also is not to your point, it's not a gatekeepy thing to say you need to be well read. It's that you start and become well read simultaneously. Because if I had waited, I wouldn't have made anything, because I still feel like every day that I read something, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I not know this existed? Even down to like Ben Robbins and Microscope. I knew about Ben through Microscope. And then I was going to talk to him. We're planning on meeting soon. And I was like, I just need to do a double check on this guy. I'm like, oh my gosh, he is so influential in the space. He freaking came up with the term West Marches for a campaign style. Like that was him in an original blog that he wrote about a campaign that he ran, and he made so much. And like mine kind of fits in a West Marches like umbrella, so that's perfect. And so realizing that, I just told him, I'm like, I had no idea. Rather than trying to pretend that I knew everything about him.
You're like, I just read so much. Holy cow.
I'm like, oh my gosh, you're the perfect person to talk to. But like, yeah, it's a matter of like recognizing that, sure, you might read. It's fine to retread design space. That's you might do something different. Good. Like that's exciting. But also like it's recognizing, and that's why I like designing in open, like in out in public, because like I get to say, hey, I'm working on exploration. This is what I'm trying to do. And somebody goes, I know somebody that reminds me of. Why don't you check out their work? It might save you time, or it might inspire you to do something else. And that's been a blast, because I was nervous to start and make my own system. I was like, maybe I should just hack stuff right out the gate. Maybe I should just like take other systems and make supplements. And like, that is wise, but also I'm glad that I didn't, like I'm glad that I started fresh and wandered and made mistakes and made unnecessary mechanics that I later omit, like that was part of my learning process and is still part of that process.
And yeah, I think the idea with like talking about being well read, like you said, like you are learning and well read simultaneously always. And like you are always, ignorant and gaining mastery. And I think that's just it's an important thing to keep in mind. Of like, I also just think like it's fun to read, like to discover new stuff. Yeah, I think it's so fun. Like at the very least, you're like, yeah, I'm working on this exploration thing. At the very least, about Perilous Wilds now, and you're like, oh wow, this is so cool. This looks great.
It's awesome.
Whether or not it affects your design process, whether or not it impacts anything you're doing, you're aware of a cool game, and that's that's cool. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that like when it comes to learning in the space and growing in the space, that as you're getting connected, like if you're listening and you're wanting to make a game, one, you should just do it. But like two, like reach out to people, reach out to me, reach out to other creators, because like one, they'll have a shit ton of recommendations for things you should read that'll help you. And two, they're accessible and they're people that want to help and they want more games to exist. So I love doing it. It's been a wild year. You know, it's over a year now since I started Battle School. And it's like now I have a game that exists. That's a weird feeling. And like it's also easy to breeze past it and be like, oh, like I have so much more to do, and like I need to promote it, I need to get distribution, I need to work on my next thing. But it's also like, no, like my game exists. Like it's out there, people play it. I'm proud of it, and I'm moving forward. And I love doing it, and I want to keep doing it.
Yeah, that's part of what sort of the impetus of this podcast is. Like, I'm always excited whenever I see a thing on social media. People are like, oh, I did this thing. I'm always the person that like wants to know weird details about things, where it's like, oh, how did this work? How did this happen? How did you do this, and this? And so that's kind of the idea behind this podcast, is just like, I just want to talk to people about like, how did this work? How did this all, yeah. How did you do XYZ?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm such a process nerd too. Like I like to reinvent and re-optimize my own processes when it comes to learning and like in creating. And it is I am discovering how chaotic my process is while also codifying it, if that makes sense. And it's been interesting. Like I'm a huge like a huge part of my process is not actually writing anything down for a very long time. Like actually I because I'm a verbal processor in a lot of ways, so like I need to conceptualize it for a long time before I get caught up trying to structure it and formalize it, because if I can't pitch it to you, it's not ready, right? Like it's
Sure.
not ready for me to put pen to paper. And then what I do is I write stream of consciousness, rough draft mechanics or whatever. And then I don't ever look at that again. And then I start over again. And I do that a couple times. So like I will every once in a while pick back through earlier drafts of stuff, but it's just processing, right? Like it's just getting it out of yourself. And that's why I say just start, right? Like you can throw it away. You can do something else that's better. But like I have so many rough drafts that I never look at. And then they're kind of like just in my brain, like, oh yeah, I wrote that mechanic. But like, I understand the vibe of it. I understand how it's supposed to feel. And then when it's actually time to like really get it all together, because I've got most of it, I can pitch it. I know how some of the actual mechanics are going to work and feel. Then I start writing stuff down, and then it's like, okay, we're making a book now. But and like I said, I'll pick through some of those rough drafts, but usually they just sit there and get dusty and never get seen again. But like I didn't know that about my design process. I had no idea how to write a book, a year ago. But like I've done a lot of like, this isn't the only game I've been working on, right? In the last year, it's like I've been working on a bunch of them, and they're all at different points in that process and figuring out, how do I chase the serotonin rabbit? Like with this project, when do I just have to work on it versus when I want to work on it, and then how to stay inspired and reading new books and stuff. It's fun learning about your own needs in creative processes and then trying to better facilitate that for yourself.
Well, that's why so many people say just start, right? Because it's like you have an idea, put it somewhere, like materialize it in some way, make it real in some way. And then if you have a different idea, okay, cool, write that one down too. And then you will determine whether or not what of those is worth continuing to think about. But now it exists somewhere. Now you can take it and you can change it and you can add and you can go. I love the idea that you just like write a bunch down and then you're just like, all right.
Yep.
Put that over there.
It's like, because then you remember it and you throw away the shit that you didn't need, that you over engineered or whatever, right? Like, I'll write mechanics for something and be like, this is how it's supposed to work. And then my brain understands intent. It understands what I tried to put down, but maybe I had to like make a million assumptions in that mechanic because it's in isolation, right? It might reference 10 other mechanics that don't exist at all and might never exist. So that would take forever to edit that mechanic down. It's better for me to remember it than to ever go back to that original text, right? Because it's
right. The important part, the bit that you'll remember is the important part of it. And you'll go, oh yeah, right, that bit where I wanted to do this, right.
Because also, you're probably going to read the game and then you're going to never read through the whole thing again, right? Like, you need to be able to understand the mechanic and feel it and know the ethos of that game more than you need to know the actual words in that book. Because it's the whole rules as written versus rules as intended. That's why like D&D is such a difficult example, I think, for so many people, because of the diversity of things that it's trying to do at any given time, there isn't a core ethos. There isn't like this is what this game is for, facilitating this kind of gameplay. It does so many things and it says yes to so many things. And that's fine. That doesn't make it a bad, well, I might argue that, but I still enjoy playing D&D on occasion, right? So like, but yeah, it's just one of those, like, I truly believe that if you can get a feel for what the designer was trying to do, you won't need to read the book. And you're just going to have fun at the table.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, we could sit here forever. But in lieu of the last episode where I definitely let it go way too long, we've got like a couple more questions. Now I want the listener at home to know.
Yeah.
I want the listener at home to know. Andrew didn't know about this. I had a little checklist of things that I wanted to ask Andrew about, right? Of like, these are the things I want to make sure we hit during this interview. I had a little checkbox. I have checked all of those boxes from answers that Andrew gave unprompted, except for one. So there's that one, and then there's the sort of question that I like ending with. So the last thing on my checkbox is doing a Kickstarter, right? Doing crowdfunding, doing a Kickstarter with your first Kickstarter, and then going back through your TikToks, you did fulfillment. So you did everything soup to nuts.
Yep.
How do you feel now about that decision? How do you feel about it as a person who like did their first one with their first game? Like what are your, because I've heard a lot of things from a lot of people about doing crowdfunding. Yeah. And I think there's a world where doing a Kickstarter exists as a company that's just like untenable for a lot of people. Like the ways that like Cool Mini or Not or Monty Cook Games or anything do Kickstarters is not at all the experience with a ton of people for Kickstarter. Right. So for something like Zine Month, how do you feel about the process? How did that go?
I'll call back to earlier point in the episode that we didn't dive into. Scope creep. You have to be aware of. It is if you can set boundaries and rails on yourself early on, you will be successful. If you flex those, you will regret it. And make sure they're narrow and they fit your design goals as well as your practical goals. Like if you're at all hesitant or not ready to do a ton of learning, just do digital only. Right? Like, for example, because that's going to be a million times easier for you to fulfill. You can get it on itch. You can iterate on it. If you make mistakes, you're not dealing with printing. There's no upfront cost, all of that stuff. That'd be my first thing is like consider digital only. Not that I regret doing print. I have a background in print though, right? Like the benefit for me over a lot of other people, even DJ, I did DJ's book layout, right? So like he would have had a heck of a time and had to spend a lot more money to get somebody else to do his book layout. He hired a lot of artists to contribute to his book. And it's a beautiful book. I'm so excited to get that thing out. But even down to just learning how to upload stuff to a print site is like a whole thing. That's just in producing the book. Yeah, that's been my job. So like I still hate that because it's hard. So that's my one caution. Like, just recognize that you're going to have to be, with any crazy hobby, you're going to have to become a learner about 30 times over during the process. Like, whether it's just figuring out how to Kickstarter works, how considering, do I need to use backer kit? How am I doing fulfillment? What does shipping look like? Shipping labels. I didn't know any of this other than like the design piece. I was mostly just like, I know how to design stuff. I know how to make a game in theory, and I can do that part. I'll figure out the rest. And the rest, it harkens back to most of our conversation. I just asked people, right? Like, I have a friend named Walter who runs Midnight Tavern online game store. Incredible guy. And he helped me a ton with the shipping, right? He was like, do this. Use a website called Pirate Ship, use these kind of packaging options, like all that kind of stuff. And that was invaluable. I saved tons of money because of just some advice. Similarly, like, you got to look at, how do you want to support the game going forward? Do you want to list it on itch? Do you want to put it on drive-through? There's pluses and minuses to both of those. How do you want to fulfill physical going forward? There's a million things to consider, and it is overwhelming. I don't regret doing it, but you got to be ready to do a lot of learning, and please reach out and ask people, because you won't. Doing it on your own without anybody who has walked the path before you is insane, and you won't get very far. I definitely made some financial blunders and still made mistakes. I probably was, I had 118 backers, made over like $3,000 ish, which isn't like a lot of money, but also is enough to do what I did, right? And I lost a little bit because of considerations with shipping. I messed up some stuff for some of my rewards because I let scope creep get me. Because I did more than just the book. I did like an encounter deck and some other stuff, and I messed up the quote on one of those, so I was out. Money on that. And it's just like, I got to fulfill it. So that was just all things that were avoidable. But again, having good rails for yourself of what you are or aren't doing is going to help guide that. And then, just being like a learner and being ready to ask questions and pull on the community, because there's tons of us that want to help.
Yeah, their Kickstarter has been around long enough now. There are tons of people who have lost enough money doing something wrong that they will be able to tell you, hey, here is the way that you should do it.
Yep.
I think scope creep on the Kickstarter is a great one. I've heard that from a number of people of, don't add 57 stretch goals to your Kickstarter.
You don't need
especially when you're talking about physical. Yeah, you also don't need stretch goals. I think is a great start.
Just make the game.
You can just say, here's the thing, and be done with it.
Yeah.
But also I think it was Goodman was like the first big company that I heard was just like, we're not going to do stretch goals on this. We just want to have this thing and be done with this thing. And that's great.
Stretch goals is the number one thing that screw people over from my experience and from what I've seen. My goal was like $500, right? Like, I was like, I just want an excuse to do this. Maybe I can hire an editor, was really what it was. Which, by the way, if you're making a game, I don't care what you can do yourself. That is the one thing you're not allowed to do yourself.
That's kind of the definition. That's kind of the definition. It needs to be somebody else.
Yeah. And so, if you've got like a friend or, a significant other that's an incredible editor, great. But consider somebody that's familiar in the space with games and able to edit them up from a mechanical level as well as just literary. But so I was like, okay, $500, I'll be able to pay an editor hopefully and call it good. And so it started doing better. And I was like, ooh, I'm an artist. If it's just art related, I could do a ton more stuff. And so then I did like a tarot deck for encounter generation, which was awesome. It was like kind of like a prompt list for a ton of stuff for me to have to draw that went into the book. That was good. But what wasn't good is I misquoted the production side for the deck of cards. Like, I didn't properly run my own quote. So when I did all the considerations for how much that new reward tier would be, I thought I was making bank on it.
Right.
And I lost money on it. It ended up being like $22 for me to produce one deck of cards because I messed something up. And it's just like, that sucked. But there wasn't really a way to avoid it other than I should have just said, I don't need to do this. So it's even this Kickstarter, I was looking at doing a whole bunch of stuff, even though I set those scope goals for myself. And I was like, I'm going to do this and that and the other. And I'm like, and stop, cut it all, throw it all out.
And what's fun, like you said, talking about support for your work, you know, like what do you want to do after the fact? If you have a cool card deck idea that you want to do in the Kickstarter, you can save it and you can do another Kickstarter. You can do a print on demand thing. You can just release digital and you can say, hey, it's X whatever. But I've seen too many people go into a Kickstarter and not have big problems, but be like, oh, this is more than I thought. And it's like, great. Just do, in the spirit of Zine Month, just do the book and get that out the door.
100%.
Check it off the list. Like we talked about, check it off the list, be successful, say we did it. And then you can, and then you can
rather have a game on your shelf that you made than spend 2 years desperately trying to fulfill a bunch of crazy stuff that you maybe didn't need to do just to check that box.
Having good ideas is fun, but you gotta, realism is always always good. Realism is always good. But
100%.
Right. So that's the end of that's the end of my checklist. I checked that off. That's great for me. Scope creep. But this is something I did randomly in the first episode, and I've just decided is the way that we end the episodes now. Is 3 things. I decide during the episode what 3 things I'm going to ask you about at the end. It's been different for every person. So for you, Andrew, what 3 games in 2025 are you most excited to like dig in? Maybe not explicitly from like a creative design idea of like what 3 games are most inspiring to you right now, but what 3 games are the ones that are like most vying for your attention this year?
Oh man, that's
hard. I know, right? That's I've been happy with all of these questions.
I'll try and list them, not rant about them, right? That's the real trick here. So I recently got to finally try, Jack ran Dragonbane for some of us at PAX. Loved it. As Jack said, Dragonbane is what 5e thinks it is.
From everything I've read, that tracks.
I loved it. And so I'm really wanting to dig more into the Free League catalog. I'm familiar with Year Zero just from playing some games that used it a little bit, but like I haven't dug into Alien RPG. I haven't dug into Dragonbane. I haven't, really gotten much into their catalog or Forbidden Lands and stuff. And so that's one that I'm attracted to because I think I like their design sense. And it still has some mechanical complexity that I can convince some of my normal players that are very 5e inclined to actually jump into. So definitely Dragonbane and kind of Free League as a publisher as a whole. I have played a good amount of Mothership. I haven't ran a lot of it, and I want to consider hacking some Mothership stuff or writing some content for it in the future. So I want to go and put a good amount of time into playing some Mothership this year. I have the deluxe box. It's incredible. I really want to make a box like it one day, which is the scope creep thing that I had to just kill.
It's a good box.
Oh, it's so awesome. Yeah, I was fully down that rabbit trail of how do I do this?
I do like the idea of like, okay, don't scope creep, but also how would I?
Yep, that was it. I was making zines for it, and like, yeah, I was deep in the weeds. It was bad, and then I had to be like, shut up, what are you doing? Yeah, so Dragonbane, definitely more Mothership, and I don't know. Like I have a lot of games that are vying for my attention, but I just I don't know. There's something about um many of these genres that I just haven't played yet that I'm excited to try out. You know, there's entire genres that I just haven't really dove into. I've dabbled in OSR stuff. I've dabbled in, I guess, NSR stuff, which, you know, what is that umbrella anyway? And then like story games. But the like I haven't touched Brindlewood Bay. I haven't like gotten into any of those, and I've only heard incredible stuff about them. But I don't own them yet too, and so I don't have a lot of friends playing them. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton that I'm excited to play through and experience.
I think you'll survive Brindlewood Bay. I think there's low risk.
Yeah, but yeah, I'd say that's the stuff I'm looking at this next year is kind of finding out what niches and subcategories in TTRPGs that I haven't really traversed yet, and then like digging deeper into the ones that like fulfill the design sense that I crave at the table. Like I said, like Dragonbane just felt elegant, you know, and it scratched the D&D itch that I so still love, right? But just don't get from a 5e experience anymore. And then yeah, Mothership is just so freaking good, man. It's such a great system, and I love it. I love the art. I love sci-fi. So like I'm a sucker for all of that. Yeah, that'd be my answer.
Those are 3 good answers. You could do worse. Dragonbane, Mothership, Brindlewood Bay.
Yeah.
I
don't mind that.
I have so many games that I'm just like that. If it's like
so many,
how good is that game? Oh, it's great.
Oh,
Did you read
Wild
it?
Sea.
No.
Oh my god, I gotta get Wild Sea.
Wild Sea.
Oh, that game looks insane.
Are
you familiar with it?
Yeah, it's sold out at PAX U, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like I heard people were just like, it's gone, can't get it.
Yep. Yeah, and there's like, man, MythWorks is a small company too. There's like 3 guys that work there.
And they bang it out. Like those books are gorgeous, and they move.
Yeah,
good on them, honestly. But that's it. We did it. We did the podcast.
Awesome. We landed the plane.
Andrew, thank you so much. Well, maybe we didn't, but you'll have to find that out. Out of Space, coming soon to Kickstarter.
Out of Orbit.
Out of Orbit.
Yeah.
I should have it written down somewhere. How
dare you?
That's for me.
I'm offended.
I'm learning my process. Write it down. Write the name of the thing down.
So it's launching in February. Probably the first week. I'm shooting for the first. But yeah, it'll launch in February. Funding all month. It's gonna be a blast. I'm excited to get art out there for people to see and check it out. I might even get some little preview rules out there if I can get it in time. But yeah, it's gonna be a good time.
Hell yeah. Well, Andrew, thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for taking time to chat with me about all of this. Happy to have you whenever you make time. For people listening, all of the links to Andrew's things will be in the description. It's, social medias, place you can buy his games, whatever you want. Social security number, cell phone number.
Yeah, definitely.
Whatever I can find.
That's already out there. So.
Yeah. I hire an investigator and I put all kinds of information. Because you never know what the people want, and I aim to please. But this has been episode 4. I'm going to throw the outro, but again, Andrew, thank you so much. Say bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
That's another episode of What You Doing podcast done. I want to thank Andrew again so much for making time very quickly once we started talking about it, making time to be on the show and chat with me. He was absolutely wonderful. He was fantastic. I definitely said the name of his game at least once that I caught back in the edit. And he was wonderful. He only corrected me there at the end. He's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm terribly sorry. The game Out of Orbit, as I said, on Kickstarter pre-save now. Go check it out. Follow along if you're interested, and then once it launches in February, you'll get a little reminder. You can go check it out back at whatever tier strikes your fancy. I'm looking forward to covering, talking about more Zine Quest projects because they're usually so amazing. As always, you can find the show on Blue Sky, Instagram, and now Patreon at What You Doin' Pod. Follow along all three places for various updates, and maybe consider supporting the Patreon if you've got a little couple extra dollars in your pocket. I've already got 2 more interviews lined up for the next 2 episodes, and then 2 more unscheduled interviews lined up. So let me tell you, we are hitting this podcast hard and fast already this year. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Thank you for supporting. Thank you just for being here, talking about it, sharing with your friends, anything like that. And I'll see you in the next one.